Omnissues, Chapter 1. Here's a brief synopsis of what I'm going to go over. God's desire that we would know Him versus His desire to be incomprehensible to us. God's powerful attributes versus God's prison, His attributes. Descriptive versus prescriptive attributes. Omniscience versus free will. Morality versus God's character. Robots versus morality, and a universe without God's moral system. Imagine an uncaused, self-existing, self-sustaining, infinite, unchangeable, timeless, spaceless, eternal, immaterial, omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, omnipresent, perfectly wise, perfectly just, perfectly loving being that has a disembodied mind, is also three distinct persons, and yet is only one. Finding that difficult to imagine? You should be, because you aren't supposed to fathom this being or actually understand it. You are, however, supposed to believe it exists. And now for a quote from Thomas Aquinas.
Reason in man is rather like God in the world.
I'm going to go over some of these ideas and try to explain why I personally find these concepts unacceptable as attributes that can be applied to the omni-god. This is the God I believed in for so many years. In compiling this list, it is likely I forgot some attributes often applied to the omni-god, but I think I have listed enough to get started here. I hope you will join me as we travel down this rabbit black hole and explore the inconsistent, bizarre, and mystifying ideas associated with the omni-god. What do you think when you hear a list like that? Does it seem inspiring and amazing, or does it seem nonsensical? It should seem nonsensical to everyone, as it just is. It does not make sense. To people who accept that there is a being who possesses everything on that list, it is amazing. You feel so insignificant and minuscule, and yet comforted and loved at the same time. This being cares so much more about me than I am even capable of imagining, they might say. Now I want to know, why is that? Why is it that this omni-being would not give you the ability to comprehend His care for you? Your faculties to comprehend are so minuscule, and He has maxed them out. He gave you whatever faculties you have, though. He could have given you the ability to fully comprehend, but chose not to. If all His attributes are true, what is the drawback of allowing you to understand this concept? Some believe that they will one day understand, but they are not capable of knowing in this imperfect body. Why does this question matter anyway? It seems like an inconsequential place to start this discussion. I think it is simple enough and personal enough to go over, which makes it a good starting point. Here is the issue restated. An omni-being has made you in such a way that you are incapable of understanding it or comprehending its care for you. Being an omni-being, it was capable of making you in any way it willed to do. That being did not will for you to comprehend it or its feelings for you, and desired instead for you to comprehend a minuscule fraction. So the story goes, anyway. At first glance, there doesn't seem to be any issue here. If we experience some degree of love from this being, how wonderful must be the greater amount. In fact, if He loves us infinitely, how could we be capable of understanding it? Exactly. How could we? If He would have willed it, that's how. This should have been no problem for Him to do, but He didn't. As the story of Adam and Eve goes, His desire is that we would have been ignorant. Of course, there are plenty of reasons that can be given as to why God chose to do things this way. Ultimately, you can only honestly say you don't know why. and only God knows why he did things this way. But you should accept it as true in any case. I know this doesn't seem too egregious, but I think this issue will become more significant as I go on. And now, another quote from Thomas Aquinas.
Wonder is the desire for knowledge.
Now, if we review the list of attributes I've gone over, it does seem impressive, and that is generally the goal. On a deeper level, however, I think it is something else. I think it describes a prison. If we can assume for a time that there are somehow no contradictory features listed, we must realize something. If this is the way God is, he cannot depart from these ways. He is stuck with these attributes. He might love the attributes. He might often, in the timelessness that is his self-existence, tell themselves, "It sure is good to be God." Despite this, he is still stuck. Did he choose any of his attributes, or is he just the way he is? Can he will himself to have any different attributes? Or is he just the way he is? Can he cause himself to no longer be, or is he just the way he is? Could he have chosen not to be timeless, or is he powerless to have been otherwise? Why does this omni-being take any actions? There are attributes he possesses that appear to influence those actions. Actions that the omni-being takes must comply with and never conflict with the other attributes. This presents a problem. There should be no limits on this being, and yet there are limits built into his being. And when I say built in, I'm certainly not saying God was built. That would be blasphemy or something. Now it's time for another quote from Thomas Aquinas.
To one who has faith, no explanation is necessary. To one without faith, no explanation is possible.
So you might say that these attributes are descriptive and not prescriptive. Since we certainly have no way to determine if either is the case, let's try to look at these issues in the light of descriptive attributes. God is omnibenevolent because that is just how he chooses to be at all times. So we say God is omnibenevolent not because he must be, but because that is how he has freely chosen to be. It is possible that God could be omni-malevolent, but he just chooses not to be. Okay, that isn't too bad to get through. Let's take a look at a more problematic attribute. Omniscience is a little more difficult. I don't think you can just call this one descriptive. Since the omni-god also is omnipotent, I suppose you could say he chooses to retain his omniscience and could at any point relinquish it. In this way, it doesn't have to stay a prescriptive attribute. It isn't an attribute he must retain. How would we have any idea if he has decided to retain this attribute or not? What if he did scrap that one and has just been winging it all these years? It would explain a lot of what we see in the scriptures and in the world. Of course, no believer would accept this as a possibility, and so we are left with the other problems that omniscience brings. But I will have to get into that a little later. Let's see if there are any attributes on the list that must also be prescriptive. The first one I've listed, the uncaused, is certainly prescriptive. The omni-god had no choice in the matter, it just was, or is. Just as we did not choose to be born, the omni-god is. Does it wonder why it is? Surely not. He is omniscient, so he already knows. We don't or can't or aren't allowed to know such knowledge. But rest assured, he knows. And now a quote from St. Thomas Word Salad.
It is necessary to posit something which is necessary of itself and has no cause of necessity outside of itself, but is the cause of necessity in other things. And all people call this thing God.
was a witness.